Hey, my name is Samar. I also go by Sam or First Time Panner. Any of those you want to call me, you can. This will be a tag video, and this is, I believe it's just called the eyeshadow palette tag. I did this, there are actually two versions of this, the first one and the second one. I did the second one when the second one came out, I think in like 2022. So it's been a few years, and I did that on my Instagram, so you can check out my reel on Instagram. It was the first video I ever posted there. If you hear a noise in the background, that's my fan that I have on my face because it is like 11 p.m. and it's still so hot where I am. It's not like summer temperatures yet, but my room is the hottest room in my entire apartment, of course. So I'm gonna have my fan on me the whole time. I saw a few weeks ago, I think it was during her palette week, Steph from It's Just Steph compiled all the questions from both years and answered all the prompts that way. I will put also the original creators of this project in my description box as well, but I was honestly kind of waiting for Steph to do this video because I didn't want to have to go search up the questions myself because I didn't know who created this tag originally. So now that she's done it and she gave me all our questions, watch her video by the way, because she has some really interesting eyeshadow palettes and she loves talking about them. But now that I have all the questions compiled from her, I've answered them myself. And I will say some of these, because I didn't want to feature the same palette twice, just to be able to talk about as many palettes as possible and to keep things interesting. Some of these questions I've answered with like maybe the second most palette that fits the answer, and I'll probably like mention that as I'm going through them, but I made sure to have a different palette for each question. And the first, well, not question, but prompt is your all-time favorite palette. And the first time I did this tag, it was probably different. I'm sure it was different actually because I remember what I said for this one, but my collection has changed a lot in the past 2 years, and at the moment my all-time favorite palette is, say it with me if you know it, the MAC Cosmetics Mary Jane palette. And this always like is a very controversial palette just because of how it's formulated. It can be tough to work with because it's extremely pigmented and a very dark palette, so I understand why a lot of people would have trouble with it. But if you have been using makeup for a while, doing your eyeshadow for a while, and you have a deeper skin tone, you should really have no problem with this palette. I think it was created for, unintentionally or not, it was created for a certain type of person, and I think I'm one of those people because I love this so much. I'll open it too. I have like a rag with me, a damp rag, just in case I end up swatching things. I'm not planning on swatching everything or this video is going to be so long, but it's my favorite palette of all time, so I have to swatch something from this one. Here's what the palette looks like, and by far my favorite shade in this palette is Sweet Lucy, which is this like murky green. And my go-to look with this palette every time I pull it out, because I mostly use this in the winter, and I've had this for 3 winters now. This is actually tangent, this is actually the second one I've bought of this because I lost my first one, or I thought I lost it, so I repurchased it before it was discontinued. And my like go-to look every winter is putting Gaspar, this green, olive green tone brown, all over my eye with Sweet Lucy on top of it. And I'll swatch Sweet Lucy. It's so pretty. If you like grungy eyeshadow, I feel bad talking about this because you can't get it anymore, but if you like grungy eyeshadow, this is the palette for you. I always used to call this my favorite cool tone palette, but at this point I think it's just my favorite palette in general. The Dose of Color She's a 10 did come close. I almost said that one, but I've reached for this way more than really any other palette naturally. I've used other palettes a ton of times, like because they were in projects, but just like naturally reaching for something because I have the urge to use it outside of a project, this is probably my most used eyeshadow palette. I'm gonna move on now so I don't end up talking about that palette for 10 minutes straight, because I will if you let me. The next prompt is your new favorite. So because I didn't put this for my all-time favorite, of course it's Dose of Color, she's a 10. I've had this one for considerably less time. This came out less than a year ago in May of 2023. So this is what it looks like, and this is kind of like the ultimate palette, I would say. This is one that I would recommend to everyone. If they ask me like what was the one palette that I should have in my collection, I would always say this one. It has like both warm and cool tones, so it definitely has range, and it has a few pops of color, but it's mostly neutral. And I mean, as you can see, even though I love color so much, I wear color all the time whenever I have the chance. My true love is neutrals, like I said, like grungy, murky neutrals. I love neutrals. So anyway, it has all the neutrals you would need pretty much, warm and cool, and then also just the formula is so amazing. Dose of Colors already had my favorite matte formula with their like 5-pan all matte palettes, but somehow this is an even better formula than those, and I thought it really couldn't get better than that. Like, this is their black. I have never used a more pigmented black. It looks like that part of my hand doesn't even exist anymore because it's so such a true black and so opaque that it just covers everything. Like, it's even just for the black, I don't even use black eyeshadow that often, but even just for the black, I would say this eyeshadow palette is worth it to have in your collection. This is another palette that I could go on and on about. Let me swatch the red here. Red Velvet. It is so good. Like, look at that. It is so amazing. This is the shade 10 Years. I'm trying to like not flash the mirror in your face. This is what it looks like on top. Isn't that just an amazing color? And like, it goes on so smooth. So I definitely have to wipe my hand off now, but this is definitely my new favorite eyeshadow palette. The melt swatch doesn't even want to come off. Like, I keep scrubbing my hand and it still won't come off. An eyeshadow palette that I keep for the memories is, of course, my ColourPop Avatar The Last Airbender eyeshadow palette. This, I mean, every single part of it is so beautiful. First of all, like, I love The Last Airbender. It's a show that I watched as a kid and as an adult and still have loved it just as much. I even appreciated it a lot more for what it was as an adult, and I would even watch it a third time. I love this so much, so no matter what it looked like, I think I would have bought this palette anyway. I almost missed out on it because of a no-buy I was on when this came out, and I've made sure to never make that mistake again. So this is what the outside looks like, and then the inside I feel like is even more beautiful. Like, the inside, outside, whatever. When you open it up, it's just amazing, and it's like the rows are the different elements, and it's so nice. It just it even has like the tribe elements like imprinted on the first shades here. It's just such a beautiful palette, and I don't use this if it's not in a project because other than the neutrals, it's not the most wearable for me, but still I love it so much. I don't think I would ever get rid of this palette. Even when it goes bad, I would just probably display it. I love this so much. An underrated palette, and you're probably gonna roll your eyes when you hear this, but hear me out. An underrated palette is the Pat McGrath Labs Bijou Brilliance palette. This is the Bronze Ecstasy one, so it's the neutral palette, and I'm trying to show this without flashing the mirror. This is what it looks like, and I've gone on and on about this in multiple videos already, so I'm gonna try to keep it short and sweet in this one. But basically, you probably hear Pat McGrath and you don't even think she's underrated at all, and I hear what you're saying because she definitely has a lot of hype around her, and even though I love her formula, I think her shadows are top quality. I agree that a lot of her stuff, especially in the past few years, has been extremely redundant, and probably a lot of people would say she's overrated. However, this palette specifically is so amazing, and I think because a lot of people have been sick of her lately, or her brand I should say, because she's not super involved in it herself, even though a lot of people would say her brand is overrated lately, I think that made people kind of overlook her most recent holiday release, which is the Bijou Brilliance collection, and they're so good. This is the only thing I bought from that collection. Oh, actually no, I did buy the face palette, and while that's okay, it's not like the best thing of hers I've ever tried. This is such a beautiful palette, and I think I'm actually gonna swatch the entire thing. I'm like gasping as I'm swatching it, even though I already know what this looks like. It's just like so beautiful. It's breathtaking, in my opinion. I'm trying to hold this so it's not at a bad angle, but this is what the palette looks like swatched, and it is so, everything goes on buttery smooth. The shimmers, the metallics, and the mattes, they all go on, and there's also a satin in here. I think actually all 5 of these shades are slightly different formulas. Everything goes on so smooth and so easy, and the matte and the satin are so easy to blend. The metallics are so opaque just with one swipe. It's just so beautiful and such good quality on top of that. And it wasn't even super expensive. Like, I know a lot of her stuff is very expensive. I think this, I got it on sale and it was only $25 for 5 amazing shades. And like, you can do different looks with this. So I think if we're talking about a specific palette, the Bijou Brilliance Bronze Ecstasy palette is by far one of the most underrated palettes I've ever used. This one I'm not going to talk about for time's sake, and because I just don't really want to highlight this brand too much. It's not a favorite, but you can't get rid of it, and that will be my Natasha Denona Mini Star. This palette has never been good quality, and I think that's like a well-known fact that this palette specifically was like extra bad from Natasha Denona. It's like one of the worst palettes she's ever released. And I didn't know that going into this. This was the first Natasha Denona palette I'd ever bought. I was new to eyeshadow, and basically the only decent thing about this palette is these 2 shimmers specifically, but I feel like you don't really need to pay $25 for 2 shimmers that, or metallics, that you can find anywhere else. They're not very unique. Long story short, the Natasha Denona, the only formula that Natasha Denona makes that I think is worth the hype is her cream to powder formula, but that has nothing to do really with, and all of this is just, you know, my opinion. I've tried cream to powder formulas from many different brands, and they all behave the same as Natasha Denona's formula, so I feel like the price isn't justified just because it is good. It more has to do with the fact that it is cream to powder, and also these 2 mattes specifically are really terrible, especially this dark brown. It's patchy, it doesn't blend, it's not opaque, and it fades immediately like half an hour after you put it on. And then also this duochrome doesn't even go on very well. So I can't yet get myself to get rid of it just because I did spend $25 on it, and technically I can still use a few of the shades in here, but if I had to declutter some palettes, this would definitely be the first one I reach for, because yeah, it's nothing special. My favorite collab palette does have to be the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Divine Neutrals palette, because it is currently the only collab palette I have in my collection. And I'm not saying this palette is bad. I do like it. That's why I bought it. It's again a neutral palette, and I love neutrals, and the colors in here are really beautiful. I have, even if I haven't bought them all, I have been drawn to and appreciated the color stories that Jaclyn Hill has done with Morphe in pretty much every single palette she's done, except for I think it's called the butterfly one. That was the only one I wasn't interested in. So despite how controversial she is, and how much of an icky person she can be, I do really like the collab she does with Morphe. This definitely is not the best quality ever, but I still do appreciate it enough to keep it in my collection, and this will be my favorite and only collab palette. Palette I wasn't expecting to love is the Sephora Blues Beauty, and when I open this up, you're going to see a spoiler. I did hit pan on this. I actually hit pan on it today, not with this look. This is the second time I've done my makeup today, but I'll pop in a picture of the look that I did this morning, and I really loved it actually. I was sad to take it off, but yeah, I did hit pan in this shade. You can't even see it too well because it's so tiny. But yeah, anyway, I wasn't expecting to love this palette as much as I do. I wasn't expecting to dislike it, or I wouldn't have bought it, but I was just very intrigued with Sephora's 7-pan palettes, because pretty much every Sephora 7-pan I've ever had I have really liked. They do have a good formula. I don't know why everyone kind of like, yeah, I don't want to curse, so let me just say everyone talks down on Sephora collection, and I don't know why, because they have an exceptional eyeshadow formula. Both their regular formulas and their cream to powders, they're so good. So anyway, I bought this because there also was a blue in here, and I will say I didn't like that blue at all, so I got rid of it. Everything else in here I love so much. As you can see, this palette is very well loved, and the mattes in here are comparable to Pat McGrath mattes, I would say, where they're so smooth, so buttery and silky. They're extremely thin though, so they don't feel or look heavy and powdery on your eyes. They're extremely blendable and buildable. I use this shade all the time. I mean, I had to. It took me about 100 uses just to hit pan. So you're also getting bang for your buck. This, I would say, like, definitely if you're interested in any Sephora, at least like the 7-pan eyeshadow palettes, try them. They're so good. Unfortunately, they seem to discontinue them just as quickly as they bring them out. But yeah, I love this palette so much, and I'm so glad I have it. I'll be using this for years to come. An eyeshadow palette that sparks joy is my ColourPop Big Poppy palette, and there are a few reasons why this sparks joy. First of all, my favorite color is orange. That's why I bought this palette in the first place. As you can see, it's like a monochromatic orange palette, and it's also completely matte. The other reason is you can't deny that this packaging is so beautiful. Like, look at it. It's so amazing. I also, and I've said this before, I also love cardboard packaging. So that also sparks joy. I think the packaging on this is so beautiful. And even if I ever stopped using it, like if the formula went bad, I'd probably just take out the shadows and keep the packaging and try to put something else in it, because I think it's so beautiful and I want to keep this packaging forever. My newest palette is my Melt Cosmetics Brunette palette, and I don't want to blind you, so I'm going to take it out of the packaging right now. Again, orange magnetic cardboard packaging, my favorite. There's not too much to say about this palette. It just objectively is my newest palette. I'm glad I have this. I don't regret purchasing it. However, it's not a tippity top favorite because you can't do too much with it for what it is. There are like 2 different looks that I can do with it, and that's totally fine because they're go-to looks and it makes things pretty easy for me. But it is a bit limiting, but I don't regret buying it. I definitely wanted to try it, and I love Melt's formula. My oldest palette is another Sephora palette, and that's my Southwest Sunrise. You're an OG if you know what this is. I feel like no one ever talked about this palette. Like, I never even see videos, new or old, on this eyeshadow palette. So yeah, I think people just really don't want to buy Sephora eyeshadow, which is odd to me because there's nothing wrong with formula. But anyway, this is what the palette looks like. It's like so old that it even has a chart on how to do your eyeshadow, like eyeshadow brands used to put in all their palettes. So yeah, this is the first eyeshadow palette I ever bought. I bought it in the spring Sephora VIB sale of 2021, so it is 3 years old now, which isn't super old. I did declutter my actual oldest eyeshadow palette, which was my original Jaclyn Hill and Morphe palette. That one at this point would have been like 8 or 9 years old. So anyway, now my oldest is a 3-year-old palette, and I would say I've definitely grown out of this palette. Not that it's bad and not that the formula is going off, at least from what I can tell. But when I just started doing eyeshadow and had no idea what I was doing, this was really, really good for me because I was really into these like warm toned, like terracotta sort of shades. That was like my favorite type of eyeshadow. And then it also had what at the time I would have said was a like blue brown type duochrome, and it looks way better in a swatch than it does on the eyes, trust me. I pretty much bought this palette for this shade, and ironically that was like the one shade that doesn't really work too well, but I still enjoyed using this palette and I still treasure it. It has good memories of back when I just first started getting into makeup. So I don't think I would ever declutter this unless it went bad. There's no reason to. Yeah, and I like to pull it out every once in a while. My most expensive eyeshadow palette by far is my Natasha Denona Metropolis palette, and let me move this over a little bit. I bought this for nearly full price. I only got 10% off of this. It was still over $100, and do I regret it? A little bit. So here's the thing. If I could only keep one of my Natasha Denona palettes, obviously it would be this one, because as I was saying before, the only formula from her that I like is the cream to powder, and this is the palette that has, out of all of her palettes ever, this has the most of that formula in it. But it is just extremely repetitive, and I didn't realize that going into buying this. So my mom had this when I was first getting into makeup. These were the tones that I liked. Again, I loved those like super warm tone, almost orange neutrals, which this has a lot of, and this kind of just looked like pretty much the perfect palette for me. And I couldn't get it because it was discontinued, so I think it was that idea of like, oh, if only I had this perfect palette. So when it came back in stock a few years ago, I immediately jumped on it and I purchased it without question. And when I got it, I was super excited, and then I kind of just didn't even use it. It took me until beginning of 2023, so I think I had already had this for like 6 months unused, and I put it in my deck of panning because I had to. That was the prompt, and it took me until then to even use this palette, and I really found myself limited as far as like the different types of looks I could do with it. So even though I think this is decent, it is definitely expensive. I mean, it's my most expensive, especially for what it is, what you can do with it. That's my most expensive palette. My least expensive palette or palettes are my e.l.f. Bite Size Quads, and I just have one here with me. This is the one that I'm panning right now in my project Level Up. So, and I just filmed that, so you're not seeing any spoilers. But these are like, I don't know if they've raised the prices, but at the time I bought all of the ones that I have now, they were $3, which $3 for a 4-pan eyeshadow is amazing. So they're just the cheapest that I own in general, and then they're also, most of them are pretty good, especially for the price. So e.l.f. Bite Size eyeshadows. I specifically recommend the Truffles Quad, and then if you're into green, the Hot Jalapeno Quad. Those are the two best ones. My most colorful palette is my Sigma Ivy palette, and obviously this isn't actually my most colorful. It would have probably been the Metropolis palette, but I already said that one. So Sigma Ivy, and I always call this my muted rainbow palette because if you look at it, like actually look at it, you do have almost every color in here, but they're just like softer or more muted or darker. Like you have blues, you have a green, a purple, a pink, gold, brown, so you have a lot in here, so that's why I picked it for my most colorful. I will say I bought it for this shade called Thistle. It's really pretty, but when I bought it, here it is swatched. It's a really pretty color, don't get me wrong. When I bought it, I thought it was more of like an emerald green. So when it actually came in the package, I was very surprised and a little bit disappointed, but I'm still very happy to have this. I think just the photography for this palette was very misleading. I bought this like on an impulse. This was definitely an impulse purchase. I remember literally I was at work and checking my email, and I got an email that this palette had been released, and I immediately bought it without question. I think it was released during a 40% off sale, so I got it for 40% off, so it's not that bad. But I still enjoy using this. There's some really beautiful colors, like the shade Envy. Like I love a good green, you know that. And then the shade, the blue in the center, Elixir. It's like a different type of blue, but here they are right here. They're just so pretty. My hand is actually getting stained from all the swatches I'm doing, and it's like turning red from how hard I'm having to scrub it every time. My smallest palette is my Lorac Frosted Sequoia palette, and this is such a tiny palette. It's not actually my smallest palette. My true smallest is coming up in a later question, but this has the smallest pans. Look at this. It is so small. This is the smallest pans in my entire collection. It's so cute, and for a 6-pan palette, this is so tiny. This is a baby. This and my Sephora Dahlia palette are my two go-to travel palettes. You can probably understand why. This has pretty much everything you would need for a neutral look, warm and cool toned, but it's super tiny, so it's perfect. My largest palette by far is my ABH Norvina Pro Volume 5, and I've actually never used this. This is going to be in, spoiler, this is going to be in my No Pan Left Behind next month, but I have yet to use this still. It will also be my next palette bingo palette, so stay on the lookout for that. I'm really excited to try this, but this thing is so huge. I'm having trouble even opening it. Look at this. Like, I wouldn't even know what to swatch in here, but I kind of want to swatch some stuff.
Okay, let me swatch B1 over here. Ooh, this is so fun. This is what it looks like. Oh my god, is it like yellow tone? I think it is. I've had this palette for a while. I just swatched the orange shimmer. It's so pretty. Oh my gosh. And then there's like a rainbow. I think that's actually a glitter. Okay, let me swatch it on top. Oh yeah, that's definitely a glitter. I don't know if I'll use that, to be honest. This is what it looks like, because I don't use glitters, but that's fun to swatch. Oh, there's this really dark shimmer. I'm just having fun right now. Ooh. Whoa. That is so cool. Look at, it's like a super deep purple with different colored sparkles in it. Oh my gosh, that looks so fun. There's a purple metallic. This one looks very periwinkle in the pan, but it's actually like, it has a little more purple in it, and is that like a shift? It looks like an icy blue shift. I'm excited.
I'm gonna put this away for now so I can move on. I've been filming for 40 minutes already. My palette with my best memories is my Lorac Fairy Tale Forest palette, and I've mentioned this before in my eyeshadow palette wardrobe tag that I did last year. Basically, this is like my girls night out palette, and I don't like really go out too much. I'm more of a homebody. Even when I meet up with my friends, we usually just stay in. But the few times that we have gone out together, I think like all 2 times so much, but both, I did use this eyeshadow palette. Whenever I open this eyeshadow palette up and look at it, I kind of just think about like sitting down with my friends, all in like my friend's bedroom, listening to music, talking, getting ready, doing our makeup, and literally just like having a good time chilling together for like an hour straight, getting ready to go out to like get some food or whatever we were doing. So yeah, this has some really good memories for me, and I'll always cherish it for that. We're down to the last stack of 4 palettes, so 4 prompts left, and the next one is a palette that is worth the hype, and that is my Huda Beauty Naughty Nude palette. So this is like, I would say, a neutral palette with a twist, because it is very pink toned, as I feel like a lot of her palettes end up being anyway. But it also has like all of these different textures and formulas and everything. I think this was her first palette that had the like what is it called, the gloss shade. I took mine out because I wasn't gonna use mine and I didn't want it growing mold. It's just really interesting. It's very useful because it's a neutral palette, but you can still do other stuff with it, like make the look really fun. And the thing that makes it really worth the hype and the price is how good the formula is. It is so, I feel like this comes in probably second place to my Dose of Color She's a 10 palette for formula. It is so good. Every single shade in here works well. There isn't one dud. And yeah, the mattes are like smooth and pigmented but buildable and extremely blendable. The metallics are opaque in a single swipe. The toppers are really pretty, and yeah, everything about this is just really nice. So this palette is definitely worth the hype it gets. A palette that is not worth the hype, surprise surprise, another Natasha Denona palette. This one is the Baby Bronze. I actually haven't used this yet because I just like don't even want to use it, but I can't return it. So I eventually will sometime this year, but I already know because I've used her palette so many times before. And this is kind of just representing her brand in general. Natasha Denona, I'm sorry to say this, and if you disagree, that's totally okay. You don't have to listen to me at all. In my opinion, Natasha Denona is not worth the hype at all. So similar to what I was saying earlier, her only formula that is like very good quality is cream to powder, and even then it's too expensive for what it is because you can get cream to powder for much cheaper, i.e. a Sephora collection eyeshadow palette. Even just like not even being worth the price, actually being bad quality, she does have like really terrible neutral mattes. I don't know what it is. Her neutral matte colors are either all, like I said with that one dark brown shade for the mini star, really patchy and they fade and they don't go on well, or they go on but a different color than they are in the pan and how they're advertised. So yeah, I just think like she's overpriced for what she is. The brand in general, just the brand is way overhyped for what it is. It's pretty misleading because when she does that thing where like she swipes on a metallic shade all the way down her arm, that's not real, by the way. So yeah, overpriced, overhyped, and then I also don't support her brand or her for kind of just like humanitarian reasons. A favorite palette from a favorite brand is my Dose of Color's Pretty Cool eyeshadow palette, and technically this is my second favorite palette from Dose of Colors because my favorite is the She's a 10, but I already said that one. So my second favorite palette is my Pretty Cool palette, and I've talked about this one at length as well, so I'm not going to talk about it too long so that I can end this video. But it's just such a nice palette. If you wanted the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette for the mattes, just get this instead. This is like the OG purple cool toned neutral matte palette, which I know is very specific, but I think that's what a lot of the hype for the Pretty Grunge palette was. Not saying that it's not a good palette. People were saying that it was a very unique palette because it was a cool tone neutral palette that had mauve undertones, but Dose of Colors has been doing that for years with the Pretty Cool palette. That's why it's my favorite, my second favorite Dose of Colors palette, because the formula is amazing, and I don't know, I'm still holding this up, I just wiped them off, but the formula is amazing, as it always is from Dose of Colors, and this is what made me fall in love with cool tones, so thank you to the Pretty Cool palette. The last prompt is your most used palette, and of course that has to be my Sigma Ambiance palette. I will say something that I went back and forth with between was if it was going to be either this palette or this one, because like I said, I used this just like about 100 times to even hit pan on that one shade. But if we're talking about a whole palette in general, my Sigma Ambiance palette is definitely my most used. These two were my Pan That palettes last year, that's why. But as you can see, I've hit pan on 3 different shades in here. I have worn away so much of all of the other shades in here, and yeah, just in general, this is definitely my most used palette ever. And I really love it, and I'll continue to keep using it. My favorite shade in here is called Candlelight. It was the first one that I ever hit pan on in this palette. Here's what it looks like. It's so pretty, and it looks even better on the eyes. My other favorite shade in here is Marigold. It is so beautiful. It's like a peach gold flip right here. It's hard to see because my lighting is just crap, but yeah, I love this palette, and it was a great choice for my Pan That palette last year because it's a really great one and super easy to use all year long, and yeah, clearly I enjoyed it. That's it for this video. It's gonna be so difficult editing this because it's been 50 minutes of filming. But I hope you stayed until the end. Let me know if you did this palette tag, or if you even just want to answer some of the prompts in my comments. Let me know. I'd definitely be interested because I always love seeing what people's preferences are. So thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.